Hey everybody!
Hello.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the stream. Thanks for tuning in.
Cowabunga.
We're done. Cowabunga, everybody. Welcome to a really quick stream for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection. My name is Dan Amrich. I'm just a humble content editor.
Oh, please.
This is, okay, I'm an arrogant content editor. This is Stephen Frost. He is our head of production, and he knows more about Turtles than I will ever know. But we're doing this stream specifically today because, as some of you who may have noticed, the patch is not only imminent, a patch for this title is live. The first title update is available now on most platforms, if not all platforms. So as soon as you're done here, don't leave now. We have things to say. But when you're done, then yeah, go ahead and say, yeah, give me that title update, and you will get a whole bunch of new things that we have promised you for several weeks. And we are sorry that it took so long, but I think you'll find it's worth the wait, and that a lot of things that were not in our control just happened, as happens in game development. But that day is here now. It's a holiday miracle. Some of the features that you said you really wanted to see in this collection are here now, and we're going to go over a few of them. We're not going to take too much time, but let's kick it off anyway. First of all, thanks for being here, and second of all, thanks for letting me be here, Stephen. I don't want to step on your toes.
No, you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, thank you for everyone joining. This is sort of an impromptu thing, a little bit. We weren't quite sure of when the patches and updates were going to go live for the different platforms. It is trickling out today over the next few hours, some of which are already out, some which are coming out. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of go through, at least at a high level, the stuff that we've addressed for this patch, sort of answer any questions you guys might have. And again, as Dan was saying, you know, this took a little bit longer than expected. It's because what ended up happening really is that we were going to do a patch before this patch that had a bunch of stuff in it, and it just didn't make sense to have two separate patches so close together, so we ended up merging them, which took a little bit more time. But without further ado, I'll start to kind of go through some of these things that we fixed or changed or updated for Cowabunga Collection, and then Dan will field any questions as we go through. It's going to be more an impromptu, just casual discussion. We can just have some fun and chit-chat about stuff, and we'll kind of go from there. So I will jump in, and I will start with some of the little bit of the nitty-gritty stuff, little things that I'm actually sad we missed. Like, for example, this cassette tape. This cassette tape bug was the first thing we addressed when we noticed it after the launch. I don't know how it slipped through. So this actually said the same thing as this, Turtles in Time. So this icon was Turtles in Time. And, you know, as expected, many of you called that out as not making sense and being very confused. It slipped in at the last minute, but now that icon is certainly correct. So there's a lot of little fixes like that, art that was missing in some areas that were corrected. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in the museum, we did a bit of going through there and verifying what was missing and added it back in, so everything should be good. I will say that maybe, perhaps in the future, more might be added to the turtle layer. I'm not promising anything, but maybe there might be some more stuff that's added to the turtle layer. So sort of backing out here, that's fine and dandy, but people really want to know about the games and the changes and what's going on there. So we kind of went in and as a first phase is we noticed, along with responses from you guys, that certain enhancements or options for some of the games weren't working. Things like the stage select in Turtles in Time didn't work, and the reason for that is normally it would work, but what would happen oftentimes is after you selected the enhancement for Turtles in Time, which I will go to now. Whoops, did I just miss it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we had this weird bug where like you'd set the setting and then you'd go into the game, and then you would jump into the options screen to change something. And that sort of reset things a bit. So if you happen to choose an enhancement and then like a level select or something like that, and then went in here and did a change here and then backed out, it sort of reset the enhancement. So that's why some of you might have seen a situation where that broke. But now it doesn't matter if you go into the options section. It's all fine and dandy. The enhancements all work good. And that carries across to a variety of other things. I don't want to dive into all of them, but like in Manhattan Project, the easy menu mode didn't work, simply didn't work for some reason. I think that was a typo. It might have been my mistake, so I apologize if it was. I can't remember if that one was my specific mistake. But that was sort of a typo situation. It did get addressed, so if you want to be able to navigate that menu with the down pad versus just hitting the select, you can do that. It's a minor enhancement, but obviously if we have it in there, we want it working properly. Big one, SNES Tournament Fighters. The 10 credits issue did not work, so oops, I shouldn't have jumped in there. So basically here, when you go to extra credits and you turn it on, the game should allow you to choose up to 10 credits now. So now when you go in here and you go to options, you will see that under credits, there is the 10 option there now. Before, it only had 1, 3, and 5. So now that option actually works. You can have 10 credits for tournament fighters, and that will allow you to obviously get through the game a little bit more easier in that case. Other things in relation to tournament fighters is that you can now go and enable ultimates in the story mode. So for some reason, and I did some research for this item, I'm not sure why they did this. Maybe they thought it was going to be too easy. But when you're going through story mode, normally you play and your meter's not there. You can't build up your ultimate attacks. So for people who are inclined to want to do that, you can now enable that. So when you're in story mode, you can build up your ultimate attack meter and actually perform that and hopefully make the battles a little bit more straightforward, a little bit easier for you guys. So that's a big one.
I see group mode right below.
So group mode, yes. This is a big one, and I wanted to sort of thank the Tournament Fighters community for this. So right off the bat, I have to give props to the Tournament Fighters community because they're very nice folks. They reached out. Obviously, there is a loyal group of people who are really passionate about tournament fighters and trying to get more people interested in it. There's a lot of work on the ROM basis as far as mods and hacks in order to improve performance in certain levels, balance and things like that. So the amount of work that people have done in that community to try to create a version of the game that is as balanced as possible is pretty awesome. They provided a lot of suggestions, and they actually went out even and made like a PowerPoint, which is amazing. I've never seen this before. They actually made PowerPoint slides for every option or feature that they would love to have included in this collection. Unfortunately, due to timing and complexity and things like that, we couldn't include most of them. But the one that really jumped out that we wanted to include is group mode. And they even provided a memory address, so thank you that we could sort of look at to enable this mode. So they really made it easy for us to implement it. So I definitely appreciate that. And what I'll enable here, so for those of you guys who don't know, this is only for the Japanese version of Tournament Fighters, which is Mutant Warriors. So when you enable that and you go into this game, you'll now see that there is a group mode. And I think the closest example of what you can compare this to is maybe like a King of Fighters game. So basically what it is you go in and then you can choose a group or team of characters. And in this case, I'm fighting against the AI. So you can go through and choose whichever characters you want in a team. And it's exactly like you expect. When one character is defeated, you move on to the next one. Whoever has a warrior remaining when the rest of them on the other team are vanquished, then you win, right? So let's see here. I'll do, I don't know, just to get it going.
Crochet says they're down to share more memory addresses whenever you want because they know all the secrets. I think it is funny that there was a full PowerPoint for this. So there's people who complain on the internet, and then there's people who offer useful suggestions on the internet, and then there's people that build PowerPoints for you on the internet. That Valentine's Day is coming up in just a few months, and that's truly the ultimate way to show that you love something is build a PowerPoint for it.
So yeah, I mean, I won't dive too much into this, but literally it is a mode in the Japanese version that you can play team, and it's really fun for folks if you have, you want more than just a one character sort of situation. I'll die here real quick if he's going to kill me. Let's see, and then you'll see that the other character comes in. Come on, there you go. Oh, that wingnut. So see, now I've switched characters, and he continues with Wingnut, and then we'll just progress on until there's no characters left. So thank you again for the Tournament Fighters community for helping out with that and giving that suggestion. We were thinking about this a little bit already, but you guys really convinced us to include it, and I definitely appreciate your support of this game. So that is that mode. For arcade games, there were a couple dip switch settings that we, let me switch back to the US side. Dip switch settings that we didn't include that people requested. So what that includes is things like the starting lives, difficulty. I know that there are a group of people who like to do one life runs in the arcade games, and so we wanted to be able to add that in there for those folks as well, or someone who, anyone who wants a challenge of trying to play through the arcade game with one life.
Right. One credit clears is a thing on Twitch.
Yeah, one credit clears for sure. So that's there. Difficulty is there, so now you can adjust your difficulty. And also this mode, which we've added, which is game loop. So normally, of course, with an arcade game, what normally happens if you put in a quarter, you play and you have lives, at the end of the game, it just ends. And that's it. That's the end of the game. If you have this set to endlessly, the game will actually just keep looping, and you can keep going after the final stage, as long as you haven't run out of lives or continue. So again, that's just another mode that we added.
That wasn't an original dip switch. That's something that we tweaked.
No, it is a dip switch setting.
Oh, it is a dip switch.
Yeah, it's interesting that they would actually have this in the arcade game, and I don't know what the intended use for is, but maybe it's just to encourage people to get good at the game and just keep being able to play it for an extended period of time. But as an arcade operator, it doesn't seem to make sense to want to do this.
If you're on location, no. If you're a hobbyist, yes. But so basically, the dip switches that you would find in the arcade game are there, but they're not under a menu called dip switches.
No,
we have them under our enhancements.
Yeah, we
menu.
call them options. I mean, I still feel that the term dip switch settings is confusing to people, especially who kids and stuff who aren't from the arcades.
Right. Looking for tiny little white.
What is a dip switch, right? So we present it just as options. So both arcade games now have more the additional sort of dip switch settings like difficulty, starting lives, and like I said, this one gets game loop as a bonus thing. So I feel that now we have sort of covered all of the key dip switch settings for the two main arcade games. Yeah.
I'm an arcade purist, so I appreciate that stuff. I know why other people appreciate it too.
And then there was a lot of comments about the Turtles games in relation to being able to map the specials. So normally, as you guys expect, you have a jump and you have an attack button. If you press the two together, you'll do a special attack. Sometimes, depending on the game and the controller, it can be a little bit difficult to press both buttons at the same time with the right timing. Sometimes the specials don't come out. And so what we did to almost all the games that utilize that, we have added now a special, you'll see here, a special button that you can map. And basically what that special button is a joint pressing of the jump and attack button. So that carries across to 3, 4, or 5-ish games that utilize that.
Yeah, specifically. Is this both arcade and SNES?
Yes, yeah, for sure. So you can utilize that in relation to the SNES game, a Super Nintendo game as well. There was one game, and I can't remember if it's Manhattan Project or not, where the timing that you have to press the buttons between a jump and attack is a certain number of frames. And so we couldn't do that because it's a very sort of a weird window, and to try to have a button press that triggers another button press a certain time after would have been a little bit awkward to do. So that one, because of the time difference, we couldn't do. But for all the other ones where it's basically the two buttons pressed within a certain number of frames of each other, we enable that as a special option. So almost all the games have that now, and hopefully that will make things a little bit easier for folks.
Yeah, I think this was a huge request on social and the feedback that we got after the game came out. So I'm really glad that we have, because people are like, so are you going to enable what the original console game did? I was like, I can't really say that we're going to restore what was on the SNES, but we've got a solution that makes sense now for the way that this works. So it was sort of like, I don't want to tell you, like, we're giving you what you want, but we're not giving you what you're asking for. It was
right.
kind of
And just to add clarity to that, the reason why, just as a general rule, this is not always the case, why we end up removing button mappings that are intrinsically in a game is because it can cause problems with the emulation and the controls layer that we have above it. So, a certain like A on the Xbox controller might be expecting a certain button input in the game. And if you swap that within the game, then it doesn't know what button that is. And so it could cause a lot of confusion in that regard. So that's why we sort of remove that control setting and just have a main overarching control setting that's in the pause menu in order to alleviate that. So for those who sort of are wondering why those things are removed, it's generally that, because it can cause haywire. Because like we'll say in the menu A is attack, but if you remap it within the game itself, now maybe attack is jump, and it's just very confusing to players. So that's sort of why we remove that. Moving on, in the original release of this game, the strategy guides for Tournament Fighters Genesis and Tournament Fighters NES versions were on one page almost. They were split. It was a little bit confusing. We ran out of time in order to make those strategy guides because the strategy guides thing as a whole was very kind of last minute. I'm glad we got it in there, but we had to jam a lot of work into a very short amount of time. So with the time that we had since the launch of this game, we've actually gone through and made a strategy guide for both the Genesis version of Tournament Fighters and the NES version of Tournament Fighters. So they have their own dedicated one now. And it's not just like one page now. It's like this. You can see it's all the moves, again, just like the Super Nintendo version for the Genesis one. So you can kind of go through and actually see what the moves are and learn a little bit more about the game. So now they have both been added. And I'll show you the NES one as well.
I was very happy when I saw people think that the strategy guides that appeared were actually scanned. Somebody said this is they would name the magazines. Oh, this is Nintendo Power. I remember seeing this in Nintendo Power. I'm like, no. These say Eclipse Tips in the lower left. Like,
yeah.
This was our. Oh, see, I'm blocking where it says Eclipse Tips.
Right, or on the right here, the big Eclipse tip on the right.
Yeah. Like these were obviously an homage in the style of the classic '90s magazines, which many people here actually worked on.
Yeah, it is. It is an era that people remember. This is very very 80s kind of approach to stuff, the illustrations, sort of them saying stuff, the characters saying stuff.
Yeah, but
like
we made these. This is
yes.
Thank you, Norm Badillo, our art czar, and Chris Kohler, I believe, wrote all of the content
everyone
for this.
contributed. So we had Nate, who was doing a lot of the custom artwork. Norm was doing layouts and stuff like that. Chris was writing stuff. I was putting the camera positions into the engineering was implementing this with the Watch movie. So literally why this was such a difficult thing to do at the end is that it requires so many, you wouldn't think it, but it requires every single discipline on the team in order to do, in order to get it done. So that's sort of why it was, just even this sort of stuff where you're where I'm positioning the coordinates for the camera movements, right? So again, this is the NES one. We went through and did all the moves as well. So we finally delivered on what our goal or intention was from the original release, and we actually now have given these versions of the games their own dedicated strategy guides, which I'm happy we were able to do. It did take a little time to do all this. And kudos to Charles at Konami too for helping out with this. Everyone was involved in this.
Yeah, Charles does not get enough credit at Konami as the keeper of the flame for this entire project and our primary partner for making the Cowabunga Collection, helping figure out exactly what should and needs to be in here and how we can make it happen, and getting all the legal clearances and getting us access to all of the stuff that everybody wound up loving. Right. Thank you, Charles. So huge.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing that I sort of want to spend 30 seconds on here is that obviously the team at Digital Eclipse work really hard to make these releases as good as they can be. However, in order to really have shining examples of these things, such as Cowabunga and Atari 50, you have to have partners on the other side that feel as passionately about what you're doing as you do and are willing to either sort of stand aside and let you do your thing or provide the tools or assistance to help you achieve that goal. So it's a joint venture thing like that, and we couldn't achieve the level of quality and the sort of the things that we want to do without good partners on the side. So both Konami and Atari were phenomenal in that regard.
That is absolutely true. Yeah, it takes two to tango, says, what's going on here?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
for sure.
Exactly the thing. I'm not going to show this here because I'm actually playing on PC, but for all of you Joystick fans, this was sort of a big request, especially for tournament fighters. The Xbox version has joystick support now in the patch. And then for those who have PS4 controllers and wanted it to work on PS5, we have enabled the ability to plug in most PS4 joysticks and play this game on the PS5. And that is actually more difficult than people think. It requires an elaborate process of stuff. You have to get approvals. It is not straightforward at all. So
it's like an exception, right? Like,
yeah,
because you're
exactly.
saying I want to use this controller.
Yeah, I want to use old peripherals.
Yeah,
I want to use old peripherals on a new platform. So it is something that you really have to get permissions to and ask folks to allow. It is not something that is readily or easily accessible. So we felt that there were enough people who wanted that sort of thing, especially for tournament fighters, that I was glad to sort of go to bat and work with Sony in order to have that enabled, and thank them for, I'm thankful for them seeing the value of being able to use PS4 joysticks and peripherals on the PS5 version of this game. So Thank you to them as well.
Real quick, if you're just joining us, we are going over some of the changes in the patch that's just come out for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga Collection. On all platforms, there's a free update. We were not sure exactly when it would come out, but it happened to come out like an hour before we started streaming. So today, please go to your favorite platform of choice. You can get all of these enhancements. They are absolutely free. There are quite a few. Game Informer has a news story about all of, like, with a detailed list of everything that's in this. And you had told me earlier today that it's kind of unusual that when you do a title update, and certainly the first title update, that so many things would be player-facing. Most of it is behind-the-scenes wizardry. Oh, we fixed a memory addressing issue, or some sort
Crashes,
of small buffer
like
issue, or something that you would never notice. You might just go, doesn't work as well, or we found a way to make it work better. But this one, again, like a new online play for Turtles in Time on SNES, and group mode in Tournament Fighters on the Japanese version.
Yeah, the enhancements, all this stuff.
And arcade dip switches and all the things that are in there. A lot of it's really unusual there be this many changes that affect you as a player, or that you can control as a player.
Right, exactly, and we hope that adds value to it. We always want to make sure that people can play these games in the way that they want to. So I'm glad we're able to do that. So moving on to audio, which is another situation that people always bring up, and we always sort of strive to improve. In this case, specifically for Genesis. The Genesis is always a bit of a challenge to sort of emulate from an audio perspective, not only due to the different board variations of the Genesis, but also from the fact that there's a difference between the audio coming through from an analog sort of situation in a Genesis board to our digital representation of it. And what can happen sometimes is that it comes off tinny. Even though it's accurate, it comes off a little shrill or tinny because there isn't any sort of analog filter involved with it. So what we've kind of done now is, let's see, is that in the pause menu? Or is it? Sorry, hold on a second. I forgot where I put this.
This one floored me because I was not aware of all of the variations. Of Genesis sound hardware. Even 3 different Genesis units might have 3 different ways of processing the audio.
Yeah, there's also the Nomad too, which is is another one if you want to consider that. So they all have different, depending on how you're going to play, because some people played it on the Nomad. But so in relation to audio in general, not just Genesis, we've gone through and rebalanced stuff because there were some issues, and we found some stuff in relation to even the arcade games where there are multiple chips that are handling different aspects of audio. And maybe the balance between them, the volume balance between them, is not what it is supposed to be from the arcade. And so we've gone through and kind of reevaluated that, adjusted that. We've adjusted the volume levels across all the games in general in relation to the UI and tried to make them a little bit more balanced. And then in relation to the Genesis, we've gone through and adjusted the Genesis stuff too, and actually did some kind of blind audio tests, as Dan will attest to, where we would provide samples of different audio settings for the Genesis and kind of like which one seems better or accurate.
Yeah, which one feels right, which one sounds the nicest.
Right.
They were all valid, but there were some EQ tweaks on a few of them and things like that. So it was, it at the end of the day, it is a subjective decision.
Right.
And audio is super subjective, just the way that like musical taste is super subjective. Some people like more highs, some people like more lows. And again, complicating it is like if there's 3 different ways that the Genesis produced audio over the years, then your Genesis doesn't sound like the other person's Genesis, but you're both right in that that's how a Genesis game should sound.
Exactly.
So it was kind of fun to be like, there's no right answer. Just listen to these different audio samples and let me know what you think.
Exactly.
And several people were asked to, pretty much the entire studio was asked to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of key, right? And not only that, like I mentioned before, the low pass kind of filter on the Genesis situation, we have added that as an audio filter as an option for the Genesis games now. So if you feel that sort of the digital representation of that audio, the emulated version of that audio, is a bit too shrill or high pitched for you, you can have the audio filter turned on. It's on by default to better sort of match the Genesis experience, but you can, just like every other feature and everything that we do, you play it the way you want to play it. If you liked it the way it was, you can just turn that off, no fuss about it. But that option is there.
No, we didn't ruin it. Yeah.
We try to do everything that we do, we try to make sure that it's an optional feature so that if you liked it one way, you can play it that way. If you like it another way, you can play it the other way. We just want to provide you the tools to be able to play these games the way you want to. You choose how you want to play them.
Right.
And so that's always been our mantra and our thing. It's the same way with the low pass filter. It defaults to on because we felt internally that it sounded more accurate and to the original model. But you can certainly turn that off and restore it to how it was before this patch.
Sure.
So that is audio in the summary. Again, we balanced all the audio across the board. Went into the arcade games and balanced out the chip balances of those, volume levels, so that should be better. Specifically Turtles in Time for sure. We spent a lot of time trying to balance the audio in Turtles in Time. And then of course, like I said, the Genesis, all the Genesis games have a audio filter option in the pause menu if you want to turn that off or on. So
cool.
That's that.
I know you have a sort of an agenda of how you want to go through this, but I'm also looking at all of the questions and stuff, and there's a lot of people asking about online play and stuff. I assume you're going to.
Yes, I will be jumping to online the last thing because that's sort of the big thing.
Okay.
So the next thing I am going to go to is the Game Boy games. So Game Boy games before, we only had the sort of gray, sort of emulated look of it. We didn't really have the color stuff, and I always wanted to add that, but we just didn't have time to do it. And so I said, well, if we're going to add the color stuff, we should really deliver on all the color stuff. So kudos to Kevin, our CTO, for helping to implement this. But basically now how it works is there's 4 different things that you can kind of do. If you want the Game Boy Color sort of look for this game, right? If you were to put it into the original cartridge into a Game Boy Color handheld, then what you can do is bring this up and turn on Game Boy Color, right? So now when I boot into this, you'll see right away that it uses the Game Boy Color colors. And
this was baked into the original cartridge, right? Like the palette.
Yeah,
itself.
sometimes, well, it depends on if, like, some games had it, some games didn't. If a game didn't, then the Game Boy Color would try to just choose a palette that works for it. So some games were coded specifically for it, some games weren't, because they were too early. Like Game Boy Color was even in existence, right? So you can kind of see now that it has the Game Boy Color scenario, right? And you can play through these games again in that tone. Or whatever color you want. The other thing, which I'll have to quit out for, you'll notice here at the bottom, there is a color palette option. Now, that is off by right now because I am in Game Boy Color mode, but I'm going to quit out and then turn off Game Boy Color mode and then go back into this game and show you. So this is what it looked like pre-patch, right? This is the normal default sort of scenario. So now if you go into the pause menu and turn on color palette,
what's live?
You can turn it to Game Boy, which is sort of the DMG, the original Game Boy Color palette, which is this, right? This is something that you would be more familiar with. And if
so much nostalgia just seeing that shade of green
if
on
you turn
the
this to
screen.
LCD photo, then maybe this will be like, you You
Wow,
can imagine like
yeah.
this or something like that, or
Wow, I should be paying attention in class. That's the first memory that comes back
Right.
to me when I see that.
yeah, exactly. So you can do whatever filter you want in relation to these colors. I'll just turn that off for the time being. And then Game Boy Colors, you can go to that one. There's Game Boy Pocket, so that has a different color palette,
Right.
which is more of a lighter greenish, whitish color. So you can switch to that. The one that I love, for those people who have Game Boy Pocket lights and remember the bluish hue of the light on the Game Boy screen, we actually have that now. So
great.
no matter how you played these games originally, you can now switch to the color palette and play it that way. Or I expect most people will want to do Game Boy Color, but you now have all those different color palettes at your disposal.
And the dot matrix filter goes over any of these classic
Yeah, you can
Game
turn on
Boy
any of the
ones as
filter
well.
stuff on any of the stuff like this if you wanted to, really. So any way you want it, but now you have 3 color palettes and then a Game Boy Color option as well for all of the Game Boy games.
That's awesome.
So that was a big one that we really wanted to add. It was something that people had mentioned, especially at least a minimum the greenish
Right,
color
the
from the
classic.
DMG Game Boy,
Yeah.
right? So we wanted to make sure that was there.
I love that the Game Boy Pocket light is in there.
I crack up when we do it but it's like that's the digital eclipse. That's such a digital eclipse thing,
Yeah.
right? Like no one. I mean, there's only a certain number of people who remember the Game Boy Pocket Light. It's not like the most the greatest color palette of all times because everything's blue because
But
of the light.
it's distinctive.
But yeah, it's very distinctive. But we're like, hey, in the sort of if we're gonna do this, we might as well do it.
I gotta say, why not? Is something that I hear a lot around the office. Like, well, why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
if we can get green, why wouldn't we also do blue? Like, it's totally valid.
Right. Exactly. So before we jump into online, I guess are there any other questions I can answer before we dive into the
I don't
online
think so. I mean,
smorgasbord?
honestly, I've been sort of watching you as much as I've been watching the chat, and most people are sort of surprised to see the depth and
Cool.
how far you've gone into some of the details. Most people are seeing things that they had asked for and were
Yeah.
hoping for, which is pretty great.
Cool. Okay.
So yeah, I think you can keep going. If anybody has anything, we're gonna. There's some funny jokes in here too.
Right.
Sorry, but.
Yeah, no worries. I will continue.
Where is Giuseppe, the 5th turtle? Sorry, Mark. We couldn't find him in the memory address, but go ask.
we don't
Kochak.
have enough
And,
space to store him. Like it's too much. So online is a big thing. We did our best given the time frame that we had to try to improve online and think of creative ways in order to make the online experience better for people. There are some underlying stuff that we did on online. It is still not going to address scenarios where you have a variety of people who have very bad connections to you, and like you're spread out amongst the United States or the world or whatever. So that still is going to be a rough situation. No one's going to be able to solve that situation outside of a server, maybe, which we don't have. We have peer-to-peer sort of set up for this game. So we've done some improvements, which I hope will improve stuff in most situations, but there's still going to be a lot of cases where it's still not going to work well if someone has a really bad internet connection or there's a lot of lag and stuff like that. We are going to continue because there will be at least one more update to this game, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that will hopefully include a little bit even more functionality that will improve online situations, or at least provide info to people about why, who has a bad internet connection and things like that. So you can at least have
Whose fault is this?
Yeah, who can have informed decisions and things like that. But what we did for this release is, first one, the big one, of course, is Turtles in Time is online. So now when you go to this menu, you can tap right once and Tournament Fighters, not certified, what am I saying? Turtles in Time, there you go.
Yeah.
Turtles in Time. I'm just thinking about Tournament Fighters still. Turtles in Time for the Super Nintendo is now playable online, similarly to the other 4 games that were there before. Obviously, this was a huge request by fans and people. And obviously, I've gone through, I won't go through again, the reasons why we chose the 4 specific games that we chose. We only had a finite amount of time to get online working for a certain number of games, and so we wanted to make sure that there was diversity and there were enough games to allow for larger support of players and things like that. So I still stick with the selection of games that we had originally, but we were fortunate enough to be able to have some time to go in and implement an online system for Turtles in Time. So for those of you who have been expressing your comments and your opinions about really wanting this, we have added it now, and so you can play that starting today. In relation to other aspects of the improvements, we've done general improvements in the background, but other things that we have sort of done now to help with things is, for example, you can now, for the arcade games, which are generally the ones that have the most problems with 4 players if you're having bad connections, you can actually now adjust the max lobby members down. So you can do 2, 3, or 4. So if you want a situation where you just want to play with another person or 2 other people, depending on how good your internet connection is, you now have that option to create lobbies of that size. Obviously, the other games outside the 2 arcade games are only 2-player games, so that doesn't really matter. But we really wanted to allow people to be able to adjust this to help out in that regard.
Sure.
The other big thing is that while most people don't adjust frame delay, this is a great way for bad internet connections to help reduce issues. And most people don't understand frame delay or are afraid to do it because...
I was going to ask you to define it.
Yeah, so basically what it is an additional buffer because it adds more frames from the time that you sort of press a button, right, until the actions are on screen. And that delay makes it, in some ways, without going to have, gives a little bit more of a buffer for data to be sent from player to player, right? So if data is coming back late, which is what causes lag, the delay in inputs is going to help kind of hide that lag a little bit. So obviously the greater you increase this to 8 in a bad connection, it's definitely going to allow more time for the data to come, but you're going to have a noticeable input delay from when you press the button to it appearing on screen.
Okay.
Right?
So it's worse for you, but might be better for the overall game?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, it'll definitely be worse for you from the standpoint you press the button and then it's going to be a certain number of frames before it appears on screen, right? And you'll find that noticeable. So what we have added, since most people don't do this or adjust this, is the automatic mode for frame delay. In that, what we do now is as more and more people join your lobby, we increase the frame delay for everyone involved by a small amount. And hopefully that will improve the situation for most people in most cases without having a noticeable lag in the button press. So, with 2 people, it's not going to be much. With 3 people, it's going to bump it up, the input lag a bit. And then with 4 people, it's going to bump it up again. So it's automatic by default. But just like everything else I've stated, you can go in here and adjust it based off of your desired thing.
Yeah.
So if
tweak to taste.
Yeah, if you are playing a friend who or a group of friends who just have a bad connection, then you guys are probably going to need to go in here and adjust this frame delay a little bit in order to make it more of a pleasant experience. So again, we're trying to add some more options for you guys. Automatic is now the default, and hopefully that will help people with those outlier sort of performance situations and issues.
I do have one question about online from the chat. Several people have asked about Steam Remote Play. Was that considered, or is that something that might get added in a future patch, or is that just sort of like that ship has sailed?
Right, that is a very good question and should be enabled right now.
Oh, okay.
So yes, so if you go and download the Steam version and boot it up, you should be able to see the Steam Link enabled icon that appears on the bottom right. I haven't confirmed that if it was completely turned on for the public yet, but as I've Konami's in charge of that. But it should be there, and I will check after this call. But if it's not enabled right now, it will be enabled today.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's much better news than I was expecting you to tell me.
Yes. So the benefit for Steam players, obviously, is that for any online game, or not online, but any multiplayer game, you can use Steam's system and be able to play like couch co-op with everyone. So, so even games that don't support online, but
be
multiplayer,
made to support,
like Manhattan Project, you could play that, via that right now on Steam.
Funny you mentioned Manhattan Project.
Yeah. So, so let me continue with my online thing. So another aspect that people have been asking about is, why is online always in a smaller scaled screen in a certain way, and we can't adjust that? So what I've gone in and done is now we've hooked the two together. And so whatever the offline mode settings are, so if you have a border on, if it's zoomed in or stretched, any of those settings now are saved and reflected in the online version of that game. So whatever your offline settings are, that will be what your online settings are.
Okay.
So now, hopefully, just organically, without changing anything, I am hoping that the online sort of settings will now be reflected to what people want it to be individually. Not only that, this reminds me of one thing. I actually went in and now, before, we had universal settings. So if a border was off, it was off for all games. If a game was scaled up, it was scaled up for all games and things like that. It was sort of universal. So we've gone in now and every game saves settings individually now. So if you want a Game Boy game that's stretched out, it does not change that for any other game. It only saves it for that particular game. So you can go through now, through all the 13 US games and 11 Japanese games, and set them any way you want to, and those settings will be stored. So again, that was something like, well, if we're going to already match the online settings with the offline settings, we might as well take the extra step and allow people to adjust every single game the way that they want to. So now you can do that.
I have a follow-up question from Kosha, who's always looking for a fight as one of the key tournament fighters folks. Wants to know if SNES's Turtles in Time's versus mode can be played online. He said it's not as good as Tournament Fighters, but it is fun to goof around with sometimes.
Not at this time. We'll investigate it. So, we wanted, given time constraints and things like that, we really wanted a simple way to be able to have people jump in and play Tournament Fighters, and that's literally by just jumping into the main game mode.
Okay.
We have a save state that starts there, and you jump in. We might explore for the next patch if that's something that's feasible or how we might handle that. But at least for this release, being the first one, we just wanted to keep it manageable and get it out there in a reasonable amount of time. And the best way to do that was just, let's just play the main game mode and
also there's this, you're probably familiar with the term feature creep, which is, you could do this, and then you start adding all these sort of milestones that you want to hit, and then none of them ever actually come out. So sometimes we do have to just say, all right, well, let's do this because we know this will get done.
Yeah, and as you guys know, in development, there's always this fine line of balancing out what you do and the time that you have. And not to say that this is extreme, but let's say the time that we would have spent to do that versus mode and having that enabled in an intuitive way, maybe that would have reduced our ability to do the Game Boy games, color games.
There's always a balance.
There's always a trade, right? There's only so much time that you have. We tried to spread the love across the board as much as possible based off of feedback and also our own internal desires. So hopefully people feel when they look at this patch that we have tried to improve dramatically across the board in every area. But the cost of that is obviously we can't dive so deep in any individual area, and that's something that it's just an unfortunate side effect of development deadlines and stuff like that. So that's not to say that won't happen in relations to Turtles in Time. It just in the desire to get that out there to people, we had to focus on a specific mode in order to get that working properly. So that is that. Trying to think if there's anything else. The only other thing, and I'll leave it open to any questions after this, is that there will be another patch. Konami has announced this as well. We will be taking Manhattan Project online. So that's the last sort of key multiplayer game that does not have online. So we will be working on that starting in the new year. And there might be a few other additions to that final Cowabunga patch for fans and things like that. Like I said, maybe some things in the Turtle Lair and other little bonus things like that. I don't want to promise anything now because we're still just trying to figure out what we can get done in the amount of time that we have. But for sure, we will be taking Manhattan Project online.
Several people are asking if NES 2 would be taken online as well.
No, the only plan now is Manhattan Project. As far as I think it's the next game up that people want to do, right? And I've felt that too. That it gets to a point where the more games you have online, the wider pool of people, there's less and less people playing each individual game because it's spread out so much. So it starts to get like the situation like, a month from now, like no one's playing this game or no one's playing this game, and it's just like becomes a desert, right? So we have to be sort of mindful of that. So the only thing now that we can sort of promise is Manhattan.
Okay. Got another feature that I didn't even know was in here. Pad Warrior says there's a boss rush mode for the Japanese version of Turtles in Time on SNES. Is that something that's going to be added? Is that the same? That's different than group mode?
Yeah, that's a different thing. No, we don't have any more current plans to sort of add any more modifications. I think we are in a good place with all the modifications and stuff that we can do without a bit more work. I mean, we're going to explore a little bit more in relation to things that we can do, but we're at that phase now where we're kind of trying to finish the game and sort of close that chapter and move on to other things as well. And we want to make sure that we're mindful of bug fixes and features that people want. But yeah, we have to call it a day at some point. So probably, I'm not going to promise any more enhancements or dip switch settings or anything like that, at least at this time. Things might change in January when we figure some things out or we find some additional time or resources to be able to do that. But at least right now, what you get in this patch is what's going to be there.
Okay. And Laker Zombie, a number of people have been asking for God mode in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on NES. Are there any, do we not have that? I thought we...
No, we only have like that for... God mode can cause some more challenges than people think, especially if the game doesn't inherently have it. If you fall into a pit, like for example, and you have God mode enabled, what happens? The game doesn't think you're dead. You're stuck somewhere off screen.
Oh, I see.
So people just assume like, oh, just turn on God mode and that will be it. It'll be easy. But like, there's a lot of problems you have to solve if the game never intended to have God mode in the first place.
Right.
And that's a classic example. Something happens, or it's not the case with these games, but some cases like, oh, you're supposed to die for some reason, or your health for some reason is supposed to reach 0, but you can't, and so that ruins stuff. But I think the pit thing, or being stuck somewhere, or even if a glitch, let's say a glitch that you kind of get stuck out and you're supposed to be dead, but you're not dead, and the game is in the state like I don't know what state you're in. So no plans for that. Hopefully between like the watch movie stuff and rewind and things like that.
Right, there's other ways to let you sort of like, hack your way through it.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully that's enough tools for people. You just got to get in there and just try your best and do it.
But I thought all these games just have like a little secret button on the dev side that just says God mode on and invincibility on.
Yeah, unfortunately not. And that's the case, like I said, if the game wasn't originally ever intended to have that sort of mode, then adding it can cause a lot of unforeseen problems.
All right. Yeah, I mean, most people are saying their biggest issues, they're very happy to see this. The biggest issues that they had or the biggest requests or wish lists that they had are addressed here. They're looking forward to, lots of people looking forward to Manhattan Project Online in the next update, which is great. Again, if you have just come in at the tail end, please go back and watch the rest as soon as we're done broadcasting. There's a new title update out for Cowabunga Collection on all platforms today. Lots of enhancements. Turtles in Time SNES is now online. Game Boy has a bunch of new palettes and filters. We have allowed for a third button to be mapped for special attacks on SNES, which was a big one for people. Joysticks are now supported for arcade players, whether you just like the feel or whether you're a tournament fighting guy. The dip switch functionality for the arcade games has largely now been implemented on the enhancements menu and the options menu.
Right.
So it doesn't say dip switches, but it is all that functionality you were looking for. And you can now limit players online to try to improve some of the latency. Remember, it is peer-to-peer. This is not Call of Duty where there's a dedicated server somewhere just saying, sure, I got all you folks. This is old school. This is how we used to do online, peer-to-peer. So the distance, the geographical distance, and the speed of your connections over that distance will affect how smoothly your online play goes. But we're giving you some more tools on a way to sort of try to improve that so that it feels more fun when you're playing it, even if you are far away from people.
Right.
So yeah, there's more to come. So thank you for the feedback, and we certainly have tried to address as much as possible. But do understand that sometimes people have wish lists that just aren't feasible, whether it's for legal reasons or resources reasons or technical reasons. Like the game, it will break the game if we add that thing, or if we do what you think can be done. Can't always be done, but if it can be done, we always try. We're always going to at least try to enhance the game for the best possible experience for you, whether you've bought it or whether you're thinking of buying it.
Yeah, and again, I just want to say thank you to Konami for letting us do this, because sometimes it's the case where we want to be able to do fixes, but there's just not an ability to. There's not resources on the publisher side to submit new patches and things like that, and everything costs money and time, right?
It does.
This, obviously it's been quite a few months since launch, and we've been working on a lot of these fixes, but these are all additional costs to the project and additional time and resources that are required to implement all this stuff. So you have to be able to have a partner that's willing to do that. And I think the reason we were able to go and spend so much time and add so many features to this is because you, the fans, have gone and supported this collection.
Yes.
Right? It's been a great success, and people see that. And obviously, given the amount of support and love for this collection, we want to continue to work on it and improve it as much as possible. And I think Konami saw that. And so when we were saying hey, I think it's important that we add this X, Y, and Z, and we had those discussions about taking Turtles in Time online, for example, they're like, yeah, let's do this. Let's try to set a plan up to do this. So kudos to them as well for being great partners. And for the entire team who worked on Cowabunga, because it was a group effort from Digital Eclipse. And thanks everyone for putting their heart and soul into this and just adding all these features that players have wanted, and also we have wanted.
One last thing that we did not address: the icon of the game on Switch. Is it just on Switch, or is it everywhere?
It is only on Switch because you get these weird scenarios. Well, first off, the Switch community is the most vocal in relation to that stuff, right? No one else. I don't think for the other platforms. I think we got one person that said something, right?
Yeah, I saw one person. Yeah. So there's this tile that represents the game on the Switch interface.
Right.
And we got a surprising, to me at least, a surprising amount of people saying, "I don't like that. Please change it."
Right.
But there were enough people that asked for that we changed it.
Yeah, I went back in and changed it. So your voice, that's a classic example of voices being heard for sure. The other platforms, there's other things where it's weird where if we change that icon, because it transitions, right? When you launch the game on PlayStation, it transitions from that icon into a full screen image of the 4 turtles. It doesn't do that on Switch. So it would be weirdly awkward if you had the new icon for PlayStation and it transitioned into the 4 turtles. It would look strange.
Right. So
that's part of the reason we didn't change it. That's for most of the other consoles, because most of the other consoles have a initial boot up image that the Switch does not. So that's why it sort of is easier on the Switch to do. There's nothing to transition to.
Right.
And also it seems like that community is a little bit more passionate about the specifics of how they like their UI icons, right?
I was very surprised, and then I was even more surprised when you put out on your personal Twitter a screenshot said soon and showed that the logo of the game is going to be the new tile there. And that was so successful that it became a news story, that people were so happy in the Switch community to hear that. And I was just like, you know what? People love what they love, and I'm glad that we can give people what they love and what matters to them. If this makes your core enjoyment of this product that much more enjoyable, of course, then you do that for half of it. And now everybody's, I liked the 4 turtle portraits. Why are you changing? Can I change it back? No. So darned if you do, darned if you don't.
Yeah, you can't. It's that phrase where you can please, all the people part of the time, part of the people all the time, but not all the people all the time, right? And we just try our best based off of feedback. And our gut instincts and things like that. And it seemed like, at least for the Switch community, that changing that would be a net positive.
Right.
And that's sort of why I did it.
But again, they're all subjective changes. We try to make, as you said, you try to make as many things improved as possible, and as many people happy, as many games get enhanced as possible. And thank you for joining us today. We have one other thing, which is this feels a little bit like a holiday gift. A lot of people said, all I wanted for Christmas was SNES, Turtles in Time Online. So happy to do that. But in other Digital Eclipse business, we are giving away a game right now, and today is your last day to get it. If you are not already a member of our mailing list. We do a newsletter, and it's very infrequent, and we really try hard not to annoy people. But the main thing we've been giving away in these newsletters is not information, but free games that you can play. So if you like the kind of arcade games that Digital Eclipse has been known for, right now we're doing a game called Jolly Ball. It's volleyball at Santa's Workshop. And it's free to anybody that's on our mailing list. If you're already part of the mailing list, you got a code for it. If not, we're going to do one more batch at the end of the day. And this is a free 4-player, 2-on-2 elf volleyball game with power-ups. It's a lot of fun. It's very pick up and play. It's exactly the kind of thing that you can get people to gather around and play over the holidays. So if you are not already a member, I'm going to type the URL in. There's a short bit.ly that you can go to. We'll see a little stuff on our Twitter as well later today. We're on many social platforms now. Look for Digital Eclipse or Digital Eclipse Studios there. And we've got reminders and links right there if you'd rather do it that way. But yeah, please do take advantage of this because we're not selling this game. We're giving this away. And after today, we won't be distributing any more codes.
Exactly. So, and for the people who have been with us for a while, they've gotten 2 other games. So we've done 3 games so far. So if you were a betting person, I would imagine that there would be maybe potentially other games. So just saying that if you love those easy to pick up and play arcade style classic sort of a game experiences, definitely sign up because this is the 3rd one that we've done.
Yeah. And I've actually had some people say, hey, I missed the earlier games. Can you send me codes? Those codes are gone. Like,
Right.
if you missed that out, please don't miss any future opportunities. And certainly don't miss this opportunity because today is the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I think that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of the update, because honestly, you and I don't get to talk as much as I would like.
Sure.
So I'm learning things. I'm not playing dumb for the stream. I actually am ignorant about a lot of these things. So it's great to hear all these things.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and
so.
there's an awful lot in this. Like we said, there's so many things in this particular update that are player facing and are things that you can control as the player and hopefully address specific things that the community brought up to us. Hopefully you will like this. Please take a few days, play with it, enjoy it over the holiday break. It's new. If you get it for the holidays, remind your friends. Oh, make sure that you get the patch. Because they will never know what you suffered through for the last 2 months.
That's right.
But thank you for your patience.
Yep.
Again, things happen in game development. We had really thought that this patch would be out earlier, but then it got sort of combined into a mega patch. So the first patch actually, for the delay, you wound up getting much more content and an all-in-one update. So,
Right.
So go get Jolly Ball on our mailing list. Download Cowabunga Collection's update today. It's available. Should be available today on all platforms. And if any of your friends ask, "Oh, what's in the new update?" send them the replay of this file. We're here on Twitch, and we will be streaming a little bit more frequently. Probably not over the holiday break, but we did a big Extra Life promotion this year. We do it every year, but we really sort of went all out this year. And what we found was that people really enjoyed seeing us stream. So we want to stream more, and we want to hang out with you more anyway. So,
yeah, and I'll leave on my side that thank you guys for all your support in 2022. We had 2 big releases in 2022. 2023 is going to be even bigger with the number of releases. It's actually a staggering amount of releases for us. So if you enjoyed what we did in 2022, stick around, and hopefully we'll surprise you in 2023. But yeah, thank you for your support.
That's right. All right, thanks everybody, and have a happy holiday, however you choose to celebrate it. And yeah, follow us on social media for the next cool ideas that we have and that we'll be bringing to you. So thanks everybody.
Take care.
Bye y'all.